Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hi, Marlene. How are
Hey,
you?
Glenn. I'm doing good. How are you?
Are you excited? Are you excited for MCP Python
I'm
stuff?
excited for MCP. And I feel like Python is the best language. I don't know. I
Honestly,
talk to people.
why does any other language need to exist when we have Python?
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, unnecessary to have the other ones. Does chat let us know? What do you think? Is Python the best language?
I saw
Um,
I saw someone mention Rust.
oh my
So
gosh. Yeah, they're turning everything into Rust these days. So maybe that's the case. Oh, someone says first was C Sharp, then Java, now Python. Maybe Rust is next. You know.
No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome to be here. We're going to be talking about continuing this Let's Learn series that we've got going on. This particular one, Let's Learn MCP and all things Python. If we could bring my screen up, yeah, perfect. Oh, my producer's just on top of things. And yeah, quick intros. Marlene, do you want to intro yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Marlene. I'm a senior developer advocate on the Python on Azure team with Gwen. And yeah, I work for Microsoft, but very active in the Python community. I volunteer for the ACM and also was on the board for the Python Software Foundation. So have been in the community for a while. Yeah, so that's me.
Jeez. All right. My name is Gwen. On the same team as Marlene, also a dev advocate here. Been at Microsoft for 4 years. That's all I got. I do YouTube stuff.
Yeah, Gwen has a great YouTube channel that has like 1 million subscribers. It's wild.
No. But anyway, we're here to chat MCP stuff, right? So what are we covering today? Let's go through this agenda. So what is MCP? How does it work? All your fundamentals. Just a quick survey chat. What's your experience with MCP? Also, are you a Python dev or in like what kind of setup are you using? Let us know. Then we're gonna have a more in-depth overview of MCP features, and we're gonna keep this as demo focused as possible.
Yeah.
We have a few slides, of course. Can't skip out on the slides.
Yeah.
Then we're going to dive into a more involved example of an MCP server. And our goal is to kind of go from like basics and building blocks into putting everything together with a couple of different examples. So you get full picture, everything you need to know. And then once you're done, you can go and like build your own things. We'll have the link to our GitHub repo and all that kind of good stuff in here too. Oh, and this is our link to that exactly.
Yes, the tutorial.
We can paste it into the chat
Actually,
as well.
yeah, I will do that.
Yes, awesome. So to kick things off, let's talk about agent. Actually, first, let's take a step back. Who here is using agentic coding or leveraging any type of like agent tool or a tool that has some sort of agent or agentic functionality? That could be GitHub Copilot. That could be Claude Code. What are some other examples of stuff like that? There's like so many. It's hard to keep up.
There's a lot. And these days, I feel like agentic coding is one of the things that has been the most popular use case for LLMs, for AI specifically. So basically with agentic coding, that's like you're trying to automate your setup. So whether you're using Claude Code or hopefully you're not using Cursor. I'm not. Hopefully you're using GitHub Copilot with VS Code. And there's a bunch of other ones. But yeah, I can see a couple of people saying Klein is pretty popular these days as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. Copilot with agent mode. That's what we like to see. That's what I like to see.
Honestly, the only answer that we're considering now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, agent mode is pretty cool inside of GitHub Copilot. And then I've just seen, I guess in the whole ecosystem of agentic coding, I've seen some insane setups. Like I was watching a YouTube video. Someone had, or I can't remember what this video was, but someone had 8 instances of an agent running, and then just like all working, doing stuff. And he was focusing on like the orchestration across, and then he had the ability of one agent to keep to like voice, hey, I need your input on this, and then it was kind of insane.
Yeah.
These startups are getting wild, but it's a very exciting time, I would say, right? But
Yeah.
I guess the thing with agentic coding or I guess any kind of form of this is just like what we talk about. It's like, how do we know when to provide more context, or how do we know when there's like a certain action? How do we know when, for example, how do we connect to our database? How do we get access to like other resources than just the code itself, or like the environment the code is working in? And then that's kind of where MCP, like I think a lot of people were asking this question, trying to figure out like, how do we connect all these different things, right? And then MCP became a thing, and it is an open protocol that standardizes how applications provide context to LLMs. So it's like USB-C, but for AIs. I think a lot of people have also said it's sort of like maybe something like REST, like how REST was a thing for like, web APIs. Like now we have MCP, and it has its pros and its cons, like everything. I'm curious to like what people think about MCP, what have you used, and things like that. But I think it's got a lot of potential. What do you think, Marlene?
Yeah, I think it has a lot of potential. It's been very divisive recently on social media. So some people
Like everything.
Some people think it takes up too much context, but personally, I do think that it's very useful. I think this idea of being able to have a standard way to do stuff is super helpful in any programming context. So I'm a big fan of MCP. This is one of the reasons we are doing this series, is because we're big fans at Microsoft of MCP. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think once you find a MCP server that really provides value, I think there's a lot of them that you're just like, I feel like this isn't really helpful, or just didn't have to be an MCP. Yeah. I think once you find one that really does bring you value, like for me, it was the MS Docs MCP. I think that one's pretty great. Yeah, exactly. I plug that into a lot of the projects that I'm working into now, and it really does help provide like better answers from the tools that I'm using. But yeah, once you find one that like really works, I feel like that it kind of like changes your mind on things. But of course, there's always things to keep improving and things like that, right? So a couple things about MCP. Stands for Model Context Protocol, created by Anthropic, meaning the company that makes Claude and all that stuff, right? Adopted by the AI community and evolving together, right? It's been already a bunch of changes. Yeah. When did MCP come out? A couple months ago, right?
It actually came out last year in November, I think, but didn't gain adoption until probably early this year. It suddenly people just started talking about it and using it. I saw someone in the chat say who made the USB-C comparison, and it was Anthropic. They created it, headed by a guy. I think his name is David Soraya Para. Para Soraya, something like that. And he's on Twitter. He tweets all the time about it, so that's a good follow as well. But yeah, mainly created coming out of Anthropic.
Yeah, good thing to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to MCP, we have a couple of parts, and we've here selected the ones that we'll be using for this demo. But there are a variety of options when it comes to hosts, clients, and servers. So hosts meaning the like environments or the tools or the spaces where you can do MCP things. Clients being the tools that you're using to sort of interact or get things out of your server, and then server actually being the functionality, the tools, the resources, and we'll take a look at what this means. But you have different parts, and this combination for you could look very different. You could choose a different host, a different client, and there's so many servers out there. But just keep in mind, these are kind of like the three key parts of like having like an interaction with a MCP server, or like an MCP interaction. Or you need these three things, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. As far as, like I was mentioning, we have tools, we have resources, and we have prompts. We're going to dive into Marlene's part. Shortly, we'll have like demos and code snippets, but just keep in mind that clients here invoke the tools, query for resources, and interpolate prompts. And then the servers expose the tools, expose the resources, expose the prompts, right? So you kind of think of that same when you have like an API, you have like the actual API, and you have something that is consuming or working with the API. It's kind of like very similar to that kind of way of thinking. So you have on one end, what are the tools that you're exposing? What are the resources? What are the prompts? And we'll see the differences of all of these. And then your clients will be the ones connecting to the server and then leveraging all these things that get exposed. And just, I guess, a little further visualization here. The tools, which are controlled by the model, right, are functions. We'll look at this shortly. And they're functions that are invoked by the model. So retrieving, searching, send a message, update DB records, like depending on what type of functionality you have, right? And then resources are ways to expose information or data to the applications. You can expose like, text or files or any like database records or responses here. And then we also have the prompts, which are user controlled, right? So these are like predefined templates for your interactions with the AI tool. So document QA here. We have output as JSON, transcript summary here as well. And then we're going to show you the examples that we have here. Did you want to add anything here before we move forward?
No, we're gonna go into the code and look at these in detail just in a sec. So
cool.
Yeah, really good overview. That's, I think, the high level core concepts of what MCP is, what the core things you need to know are. The next thing we want to do right now is show you a demo of the code. So how to actually build out an MCP server that works specifically with VS Code, but this could apply to any other client. But we're going to show you how to do that in VS Code. And if you want to follow along, I saw Scott in the chat has said, do we have a link for this talk? The link is on the screen. It's that akka link, Let's Learn MCP Python. So please go ahead and visit that link if you want to follow along. All of the code that I'm going to show today, that I'm going to demo just now, and the code that Gwen is also going to demo later is also going to be up there. So let's switch over to my screen. Yes, that is the link that has just come up there. Okay, now, by the way, I'll just mention that the link is going to take you to this repo, which is just a GitHub repo that has the tutorials that we're going to do today. It'll have each thing kind of walking you in a bit more detail through the different exercises. So you can just, again, at that link, access that. Now let's head over to our terminal. So I'm just going to get started in the terminal. I want to walk us through those concepts again, just in the terminal. I like this environment because I love the terminal personally. This is using Rich. Yeah, I love like this general setup. But the first thing that I'm going to be walking you through is trying to understand the core concepts. And we're going to be building out a study buddy application using Python. And basically, the goal of this application is to be able to create a terminal-based study buddy app that can help anyone at any level of experience learn Python or practice your Python. So we want to be able to have our MCP server and the client VS Code itself be able to generate exercises for us to practice Python depending on our level. So Gwen already mentioned this, but there are 3 core concepts of MCP. So the first concept is prompts, the second is tools, and the third is resources. We're going to look at those in more detail. I'm going to mention today a bonus concept, which is called sampling. And sampling is just basically a way that you can allow the client, which in our example today, the client is VS Code. It's a way that you can let VS Code by default auto call an LLM. So use an LLM like, I'm using Sonnet 4 today to run a command or run a prompt or query a resource by default. And so we'll also look at that briefly in a bit. So the first thing that I want us to look at is when you are starting to create your MCP server, you want to set up the server in Python. And so before you get started with this, you do want to go ahead and install MCP. If you use the GitHub repository that we linked to, it will have UV available with a poetry file, and that will have all of the requirements for this set up for you. But the main thing you want to install, you want to run pip install MCP. And this is the core code, the general code that you are going to use whenever you are creating an MCP server in Python. You want to import fast MCP from the server. So MCP server fast MCP, import fast MCP. And this is the preferred method. There used to be a method where you could import server, like run mcp.server import server, but that is not the case anymore. You shouldn't use that method because they've improved it and made it this one. So we'll focus on that. So when you're creating your server, you want to instantiate it like with this line of code here, and you want to pass in the name of the server you want to give it. And then all of your code is going to live in this file. So this will all be just in a .py file. And then you will have this code at the bottom where you'll just, in main, you'll just run mcp.run, and that will run the MCP server for you. Now, when you have your code set up, the general thing, and you've added your tools or resources or whatever it is, you also want to make sure that you have everything set up or configured correctly for VS Code. And how we do this in VS Code, I'm going to show you live, is that we are going to create a folder, and we're going to call that folder .vs code. And then when we create that .vs code folder, we're also going to create a new file called mcp.json. And this is where our configuration for our MCP server is going to live. So this is what the configuration will typically look like when you're creating your MCP server. The first thing is you have you put this input section here. And if you want to put any extra inputs, they will live in there. But then this is the core part where we have this server argument here. And you want to pass in the name of your MCP server. So I will generally, because we're building this app out, I'm going to be calling it learn Python MCP. And then you'll have this command, which is just going to be the command that you're going to use to run your server. So in this case, we're using UV. So this would just be the path to where UV lives on your machine. You can just run which UV, and that will automatically show you where UV is. You can also run Python. You can also have Python and then the spacebar and then the path to your file, and that should also work. And then in the arguments, you want to also have the directory. So specifically, you'll pass through this -- directory line here. And then where this dot is, because everything for me is in this root folder, it won't be in the example, but for this case it is. And then so this would be where the path is to your file. And then the actual server file will be on this last line here. So it's going to be your path to UV or your path to Python, I think is where this would go. And then your directory.run, and then it would be prompt MCP server here. So you just want to be able to run the Python file and have that work as expected. So for this, I'm just going to copy. I have this already set up for our first example in a text file, and I'm just going to paste it here. Now, when I've pasted this here, what should happen is when I save this, it should come up and tell me it recognizes that there's a tool in this prompt server file, and you can start the server if you would like to. So we're going to start this prompt server in just a second, but let's move forward. So that was the basics of how to actually get started with the Python server, right? Creating the Python server in code.
The next thing before we move forward, did we want to address, there's a question here, I think it's pretty relevant. Yes. Someone says pip or UV. So for our first of all, we're big fans of UVs, right? Right, Marlene? You're a big UV fan. I'm a big
Absolutely.
UV fan.
Yeah, this is what people are using these days.
Yeah, so we do have a pyproject.toml. So then you can do once you create like a virtual environment, you can do UV sync, and that'll install like everything you need. Or you could also do UV pip. What is it? UV pip add or UV pip install to like install an individual package if you wanted to. But we recommend UV sync because that way you'll just get everything that's in our pyproject.toml.
Exactly.
And, yeah, and then someone asked, "Did I miss the part where they tell us why the terminal looks like this?"
Oh, the terminal looks like this because I'm using a Python library called Rich, and it lets you just create interactive experiences in the terminal. I think it's more interesting to be in the terminal than to look at slides. What's the perspective, chat? Do we like this compared to slides? I just think it's nice because you can see the code snippets there, and you can actually I can interact with the files and things like that. So this is using a Python library called Rich to be able to create this experience. This is not an MCP server. It's just something I made to be able to walk us through the concepts before we run the code.
Yeah, it's a very nice looking console app.
I think it's quite nice. I don't know.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think it looks beautiful. I think you did great work.
Yeah. It's like the emojis and stuff as well. So, okay. So we haven't actually done a ton. All we've done so far is that we've learned that this is the code that we need in a Python file somewhere. So I will show you just now what that file would look like. And then we also created a VS Code folder, and we created mcp.json, which is the file that will host our configuration for our server. So in this case, our first server that we're going to test out is in this prompt-server.py file. Okay. And where this dot is, you would put the path to your file where the server is running. So I'm just using the dot because it's in the root directory, not best practice, but that's just what I'm doing for the moment. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is actually seeing how we can implement a prompt. So what are prompts? Gwen mentioned that prompts are predefined templates for specific tasks. And these are static, they can be static resources. For example, you could have, a reusable placeholder where you give, some people will use prompts to have a consistent welcome message, or you want a simpler way you have a really long prompt that you always want to use and you want to store it in some way. So there's several ways that we can interact with prompts. And the first thing we want to look at is actually how to define a prompt in the code. So this is, let's go to our file. So this is the prompts server.py file. At the top of the file, you can see that we are, as we mentioned before, we're importing fast MCP. And then we are running this command. This just gets the server started. And what we have here is we have this function. And the first thing we're doing is we're adding this mcp.prompt decorator. So here if you remember, this is the server. And then the server gives us access to the prompt in this way by adding this decorator. And so for this example, because we're building a study buddy app, we want it to be able to generate a list of topics based off of our experience level. So I want someone, if the user says they're a beginner, we should have a prompt that will send to our client, which is VS Code, and tell it the LLM in Copilot, and it should tell it generate 5 Python topics for someone new to programming. So this is a cool way to get information from the user dynamically and have the prompt that's sent to your client, like Copilot, change dynamically. So that's one of the ways that we would use a prompt. We can test this out because, as you can see, just to remember, it's prompts server.py here. And when we created this mcp.json file, we can already see there's a tool here. Do we have a tool in there? I don't think we do. Interesting. Am I in the right folder? Anyway, we can run this. And when we run this, it just shows us that we have one prompt. I think it was looking at an old version of the code that I had. But we have one prompt here. And when we go to Copilot, we can ask Copilot and say, use the Learn MCP server to help me learn Python. I am a beginner. Wait. Sorry. Wait, this is if we have access to a tool. The first thing I want to show you actually is this. So when we've created our prompt and we've registered it here and it shows us a prompt here, the first thing that we can do is we can use this /dash command here, and we can look and we should be able to see it available for us as a prompt in VS Code. So Copilot should have recognized that this prompt is available, and it allows us to be able to then send through a value that it expects. At the moment, it expects a beginner or intermediate value. So we could say beginner and press enter. And when we press enter, the prompt automatically fills out for us. So this is what we will see here is this value. And then we can pass it through to Copilot. And when that passes through, it immediately generates for us that list of variables. Something else that can happen is that I wonder if the problem is I think I changed a bunch of things, and I had created a tool for this, but it's fine. We'll look at something else. So that's with prompts. That's an example of the prompt. And the next thing we want to look at is, we go back to our terminal, is tools. So prompts are those static resources. We can reuse them over and over again. And we just add that MCP, the @MCP decorator.prompt, and that should just work. The next thing with tools is tools are functions. So these are Python functions that an LLM can use to be able to perform specific actions and do function calling. So there's different examples of how we can use tools. We can use tools to do things like send emails. We can use them to update maybe a to-do list or something like that. And we can use tools to also run tests. Another very cool thing is that you can use tools to interact with prompts to be able to have your saved prompts be run by the client as well. So we'll see that in just a second. So how do we actually define a tool in MCP? Now, if we go to the tools server.py file here, we can see it in this case. This is the main part of the code that we want to take a look at. So we're doing the same thing again. We're importing fastMCP is the first thing we're doing. And we are initializing our server here in Python. And then the first thing I want to point out is that we're using this @mcp.tool decorator. And this allows MCP to recognize that a tool is present. And here in our case, we want to be able to generate and create exercises, Python exercises that someone can use to learn how to code in Python or practice their Python skills. And just to make the output more reliable, I've created a data class. I've created a class, which is an exercise class. And in that class, we're expecting the LLM to generate an exercise that has a title, a description, a hint for us in terms of the solution, and then an ultimate solution, and also a difficulty level, ranking that from 1 to 5 in terms of the difficulty level. So here we pass through an example to this generate section. So we can see in this file, we have the mcp.prompt. So we have the generator to let MCP know that this is a prompt that we have. And this prompt here is telling the client that you need to generate Python exercises from generate Python exercises given a topic and level. So exercises for, yeah, I think that's correct. And here we expect the user to give, or we expect a topic to be generated by the LLM, and it should be relevant for the level of expertise that the person using it has. And then we only want it to return the exercise and the level that the exercise is on. So we're giving it these hints in terms of what to do in order to generate the response. So this is just the prompt that we're going to send to the LLM. And then here, the next thing with our tool is we want to then have these generated, but then we also want them to be created as these data, as a set from of data classes. So it should be different classes, like these exercise options, and to store them in a database, which is just a dictionary. So we should have a list of exercises that's generated for us, and the tool should be the one that's doing that. So in order to do this, one thing that I noticed is that I think, and this is something that I didn't find quite intuitive, was that with the prompts, you can access them mainly from doing this command and then running that command and having them pop out, and then you manually putting in a value and sending it through to Copilot. But there are some cases, and particularly with agentic coding, where we want the workflow to be seamless. We want it to be autonomous. So we don't want to be the ones having to send the prompt to Copilot. We want Copilot to just run the prompt and generate the exercises for us. And so in that case, we will need to create a tool to do that. And we're going to pass in context. So the context just gets context from the session, and it allows our tool to interact with our client. And here, in this case, we call our prompt here, the generate exercise prompt, and we get the prompt text. So whatever is in there, we get this prompt text back. So it will actually give us the exact prompt that we sent in there. And then after that, we are going to use these lines of code here to then send the prompt to GitHub Copilot, and GitHub Copilot will run that prompt automatically. And the way to do it is with this context session create message option. You have to tell it whether, the role of the user and so on. So just to emphasize again, we are generating the text, which is this prompt that will be returned here. And then Copilot will run this command, getting the prompt and running it like an LLM would. And then you get the response as some exercises. And then we generate from that exercise a list or a dictionary full of different Python exercises. So we can actually see this in practice. And to be able to do that, we just need to change our server. So this time, instead of the prompt server, we're going to run tools server.py, and we're going to save that. And I'm going to rerun that. And it should see that we have 2 tools available and 1 prompt, which is correct. So if we go to our code, we see there's 1 prompt here. And we have this tool, the generate and create exercises tool. And then we also have an extra list exercises tool as well, which will just allow us to see the exercises that have been generated in the chat. So we can go ahead and test this out with Copilot right away. And to do that, let me open up a new chat. And let me say, I'm trying to think of what is the correct, I want to say, I want to learn Python as a beginner. Give me some exercises to practice. And hopefully, if it does, it should immediately recognize, oh, no, it should immediately recognize the correct MCP server. I'm just, no. Sometimes it checks the workspace. And I will mention that this is one of the reasons why sometimes it's good to have Copilot instructions, which I'll show you how to use in a second. But we could say, let's just make sure it's restarted, and let's make sure to say, use the Learn MCP server. I want to learn Python and practice as a beginner. Help me get topics and practice exercises. Okay, hopefully that should work.
It might be, let's see.
Oh,
I think it might, if you close like the open files. Hold on, did it do it?
maybe
Yeah, try closing like the tools server.
Tools one. Okay. Yeah, let me try that.
Save
Oh,
there. Yeah.
save that.
And then close that one too. All right. If you, yeah. And then just open a new chat and try it.
Okay, let's see. It sometimes works. I don't know. It usually works today on the stream. It's over. Okay, let's say use the MCP server and help me by generating a topic, some topics to learn Python as a beginner. Okay, let's see if that will work.
Searching code.
Oh no, it's searching the code base. I think sometimes it.
If you switch to agent mode and then you deselect tools.
The problem is I'm not in agent mode. That's the core issue.
But it'll work in Ask too, wouldn't it? Doesn't it?
It doesn't work in Ask. I don't think it does. Does it work in Ask? I feel like it doesn't work in Ask for me.
I'm usually always in agent mode anyway, so I wouldn't. But yeah. And then did you?
Oh, you see,
there you go.
It's working in agent mode. I think that's the thing. It never works for me in the Ask mode.
Yeah.
So we're gonna allow that to run. It always works in agent mode most of the times pretty reliably.
Yeah, I would say like just like a tip that I encounter is like when you write prompts, and this I guess can apply to any kind of LLM interaction. Yeah, I almost write them like pseudocode. So I will say like call this function of this in natural language, of course. Yeah, and I'll show some examples later on, but it just reduces the confusion a lot. So stuff like that's pretty helpful.
I agree. I think usually, so something that I have found has worked, because ideally, and this is supposed to just generate 5 prompts and 5 exercises, which is why I think it's just calling it over and over again. And then we can list the exercises and see what comes from that, which should successfully have generated. Yeah, so it did successfully generated the exercises that we can see here that come up. But I will say, Gwen, is I agree that writing it with pseudocode is helpful. But for the most natural experience where you just write code or whatever, typically what I like to do is add in Copilot instruction.
Yeah, 100%.
And explicitly tell it to use the MCP server and not look at. So if I was to create Copilot instructions, I would say Copilot
inside of the GitHub folder. Yeah, Copilot instructions. Have you tried the Copilot chat now has like generate Copilot instructions? Have you seen that?
I have seen that. I haven't tried it yet, but I know it's helpful. Yeah, I think most of the times the Copilot instructions help, but typically it should just work as long as I'm in agent mode. But sometimes I'm not in agent mode, so this is good for people to see. Cool. So I will show us a version of using Copilot instructions just now, but I do want to show you. So that's an example of how we would use the tool and a prompt together. So it would give it some instructions to generate these exercises, and it would immediately automatically pass the prompt through to tell it what to generate. And we can see it did that successfully. And so that's one part of our exercise. The next thing we're going to look at in our terminal is going to be resources. So I do want to quickly touch on resources, though I know Gwen is going to show us also a more a bigger example, or a better, more in-depth example of how to work with these. But with resources are file-like data, so mostly data sources that are read-only. And these allow your LLM to read any data that's stored, and they are identified through URLs that have the following format. So it has a protocol, the host, and the path. So an example of this is that maybe you want to give the client access to a file. So you would start out by saying, this is a file, and then telling it where it is. So it's on my local home machine here, and then giving it the path to the file. You could do the same for a database. So say, for example, you had some data in Postgres, and then you could give it the path to a schema. So examples of resources are files, documents, databases, and images. So all of these are sort of files that you can pass through. Something I want to mention is the specific use cases in terms of why resources are useful is that, number one, you can use resources to be able to reduce the number of response tokens. So if you embed your resources, so you don't have this huge file of CSV files or PDFs or something like that, maybe just embedding that data, you can point your LLM to the embedded data, and it will use that, and it will use less tokens. The second thing is that you can provide assets for the user to act on. So you can have the client, you can have Copilot access resources and give them to the user who's interacting with the chat. So you can say, make sure to give the user an example of, make sure to give the user a PDF file, which contains this data or something, and it should just do that. And then you can also attach context. So you will always have this resource available, and this reduces the amount of lookups that you need to do. So we also have a server for our resources here, and it's almost exactly the same thing where we have we're importing from fast MCP from MCP there. We are creating our server here, and we're pointing to two files. So I already have in my folder, I have two JSON files. So I have a beginner exercises file, which has the different exercises that I generated earlier, or that earlier I generate some resources. And then we have a study progress JSON file. So I want to be able to track to see how much progress is the user having. And so we want to give that information directly to Copilot as well. And the way to do that is if we go to our resources server, we load up these files, and we want to use this syntax. So we are creating a decorator with that MCP server called resource here. And then we're pointing to the file, to the URL, the URI that we mentioned earlier. So we're in the user, this is the host that we are in, and this would be the path to the file as well. So you can give it a different URI if you want to, but for me specifically in this case, I wanted to point to my username, which is in the JSON file that you can see here. It should be able to recognize that. So if we go back to the resource server.py file, all we're doing here is we want to get the study progress. So we want the user to send to Copilot their username. And then we want to be able to open the file which is this file here, the JSON file. And we want to read that file, get the data from it, and return that data. So we should be able to dump it as JSON here. And if not, we handle the exceptions if there are errors. We also want to list out the same thing. We want to list out exercises for different levels. And for that, we're going to access the data in the beginner exercises JSON file that I showed earlier. And so these are the two resources that we have. The third thing I want to show you in this is that if you want, so with resources, again, you would just, let's see how we would access them. So if we go to the mcp.json file, we can change this to resources server, and we can save that. And let's restart it. And we can see that we have one tool in there, and it doesn't immediately show us the resources. But if you click this More button, you can browse the resources, and then it gives you the two options that we saw. So we had that Get Study Progress resource, and we have that List Exercises for Level resource. So we have those two resources available to us. And we also have a tool available. Another way you can access those resources is, using this command again. Oh, no.
You
actually,
use the context. You click Add Context.
Yes.
And then I think it's in, MCP Resources.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then we can say allow, awesome, Marlene. And,
where'd it go? Oh, maybe try again. It looks like it disappeared.
Maybe because of the
MCP resource.
There we go. And so here are the two resources we just added. Thank you, Gwen. So we do have this Get Study Progress, and we have this List Exercise resource. And for example, if I put that there and I put my name in, Marlene, it should bring up. Oh, it has not brought up.
It's attached in as your context.
Yeah,
so then
there we go.
If you just send this empty, I think so. It might work, or do you have to provide some kind of give me progress as the prompt?
So what I had wanted to do was just have this send. So my initial plan is to have this, and this is why I had the tool added, was that I want to be able to tell Copilot that my name is Marlene, and I want to see what progress I'm doing. So right now, definitely with it attached there, we can say, how much progress have I made? And it should hopefully...
we see it being sent along as context.
Exactly. It is using the tool because I have a tool in there as well. But it should ideally, if there wasn't a tool in, it probably could just use the resource directly, and it gives me information about the progress I have. So the only thing is that if it had just used this resource, I would probably get the same output. But again, like I mentioned, something to me, as I'm doing more agentic coding, and I don't know if that's the same for everyone, if you feel this way as well, but I don't like the fact that sometimes I have to go and click stuff, or I have to add context and add it manually. I just want to have the experience of talking to the chat and having things done for me. You know what I mean? And so this is one of the reasons why, in this example, with the resources server here, at the end there, I then created this tool. And again, with the context, when you pass in that context, and this is part of sampling, by the way, is you're passing in this context and you're having the MCP, you're having the client immediately just run the LLM for you and keeping that context in mind. And, has access to the resources as well. So for example, in this case, we would get the study progress as JSON from our resources here. But I do think Gwen is going to show us some examples of how to actually do this in, a longer example with resources. So do you want to switch over?
Let's do it. Let me hold on. I closed my screen and then I'm going to share it once more.
Yeah.
We'll do share screen, entire screen. There we go. All right. So I did see a couple comments about us using light mode. We do that because of accessibility. We care that everything that we do is, accessible and enjoyable to all. So that's why we do that. Right? I saw someone say VS Code in flashbang mode. All right. So what we are we have a different example. This is one server. Marlene was showing off like a couple different examples. But we have one where we have sort of all the pieces together. I just chose to use a different example just to show you kind of different things that you can leverage MCP servers for. So let's put ourselves in the mindset of wanting to sort of automate some tasks. So let's say I like to do research. I like to go find papers, read the latest AI papers. And then I also like to go and see like code implementations of these papers and things like that. So we have an MCP server for that. So I'm just going to start by like running it, right? So I have a prompt here, and it is called this research workflow prompt right here. And because this is a prompt, we do have to provide any input that is required. So in my case, we need some kind of topic. So we can do, what's an AI topic that we can do some research on? I don't know, like diffusion models. Let's do diffusion models. So we're going to insert that as text, and you can see that this prompt has sort of just kind of created like a template for us. And this is great because this allows us to be very opinionated as to like how we want this functionality for MCP to be used. And when you want like better responses, better experience for the user, I think it's great to be as opinionated because that way you get better results from your LLM, right? So what has happened here? The prompt has gone ahead and created this research topic diffusion models, which we provided, right? And it says the workflow, and it's outlining a bunch of tasks. One, research topic. And you see that this prompt here is almost like pseudocode, like I mentioned, right? But it's just kind of like filling in the blanks for us, right? Research topic, diffusion models, search Hugging Face papers, get GitHub searches, all that good stuff, right? So I'm going to go ahead and send this, and don't worry, we're going to go step by step, kind of working through this code here. So we'll scroll down, and we see here that it first ran the research topic. If I expand this here, topic, and then the output here as well. So it's interacting correctly with that MCP server. And now it ran the paper search. At this time, though, it's running the Hugging Face MCP server. How many of y'all have worked with Hugging Face? What's your experience with that? Let us know in the chat. Next up here, it's just making its way through that workflow, that list of tasks that we defined, right? And now it went ahead and did the get GitHub searches, which is part of our MCP here. And then it leveraged the GitHub MCP to go and find repositories. Now it's adding the papers, and I'm actually going to expand this. I forgot to. I was going to show you this, but we have just a local database. We're really just using JSON file, so we can't really call it a database. But here we see that it is outlining all the work that it's done, right? So the ID, the topic that we provided, when was this created, the status looks like, it just switched to complete. Hopefully you all saw that. But it outlines the papers that it's found on this, the repositories that it's found on this, and then some notes on this research, right? So now I have also a summary here. Research complete. I've successfully completed comprehensive research on diffusion models. And then here it just gives us a little bit of an outline of what it's been able to do. And additionally, we have this now locally, a list of stuff that I can go, all right, I want to go read this paper or this paper, or I want to go check out this repository. So it has automated that task of me going to Hugging Face, looking things up, coming back to, github.com, like, okay, let's go, right? It's like, it's all about us being more efficient, saving time, right? So that's kind of how this is working for us now. It can tell us here, you can now check research // status for your dashboard. I'll show you this in a second. So the way I would like you all to kind of take advantage of this is we have this file called paper_manager. This is nothing MCP specific. This is more so just like Python code. Think of it like helper code, right? And for your own sort of learning, go and implement the server.py. We have an example here. Feel free to take a look at it. And we're going to kind of like outline everything here. But I would recommend go and like, delete the file or like create like a server _ my own implementation.py and then create it from scratch. Sort of start to implement that functionality on your own. That's how you're going to learn how to really build an MCP server. But let's scroll here down to first these different things that we've touched on, right? So we'll start first with that prompt, which is down here, right? So like Marlene had showed to us, we have those decorators, mcp.prompt, mcp.tool, mcp.resource, right? And then here is where we have where we initially called that prompt, right? / research workflow. Here is that functionality, right? So what it does is complete research workflow for any topic, and we provide that topic here. And then it goes and it returns that prompt, but with the topic filled out for us. Now you can start to see how you could make this a lot more like dynamic in terms of like, oh, depending on the topic, maybe you want to add additional steps or make this a little bit more tailored or whatever it is. This is more of like, there's a lot of experimenting in terms of like what will return the best results to the user. And I don't think you're going to get it perfect with any kind of prompt or like prompt engineering, context engineering. I don't really think it's possible to get it perfect on that first try. Like add things, remove things, try different type of wording. I'm sure we have like best practices on that kind of stuff too. But this is sort of like our entryway to kick off all the functionality of our server this here. And really all it is just returning a string. We like to call it like, prompts and stuff like that, but it really just is returning a string, right? So it's relatively simple code here. And then we can see here I'm going to make this one more larger here, but we can see here that in the prompt itself, we are calling tools that we have. We're not, it's not code, it's just text, right? But we do have this thing here called the research _ topic. So if I think I have this at the top, scroll up here, research _ here we go. So here we have that decorator, the mcp.tool, right? And then here we have that research topic. So we see in the prompt itself, we're making calls but it's using natural language, right? We're not calling it with like Python code, it's text, right? And this tool here, what it does is it goes to the paper manager, which is that helper code, and add research entry, which essentially is just initializing a new entry into our research _ papers.json, right? Because this has an ID, it has a topic, and we want to be able to keep track of the stuff. You can envision this being like a connectivity to like a database, or maybe you have, I don't know, maybe you use Notion for note taking. Like anywhere you want to kind of store this information, you can. But we're just leveraging here a tool that can go ahead and implement that functionality for us, right? And then after that, we have, I'm going to go scroll down here. Actually, maybe I will do these side by side. So we're going to keep, all right, I'm going to organize these one sec. So on this right side, we're going to keep the workflow. And then on the left side, we're going to scroll up and down to the tools, right? So next we have search Hugging Face. Here we go. Search Hugging Face papers. And then we're calling we're outlining a different MCP server to leverage. Now, with Marlene's example, we did see that we had configured inside of the mcp.json, like our particular server. But here you can also outline different MCP servers that you want to work with, right? In our case, we have ours, which is that AI research hub down here. We're running it with UV run, and as for the arguments, current working directory inside of that folder that we're in, and then any additional things that we need to send, we send it here. But we're also interacting with the GitHub MCP, and here we have the type and the URL, and then we have the Hugging Face MCP as well. And depending on the configuration that the MCP server requires, you'll probably have to have different things or have less things here. Usually the documentation of that MCP server will have that for you. But this file is for all of the MCP servers that you want to be able to connect to, because this enables you to go to in GitHub Copilot chat. If you click on tools, you'll see here a list of like tools that you have. And then if you go to MCP server, you see I have the Azure MCP server. I don't have any of those tools selected because it makes no sense. That's not really something that I'm working with now. It's best practice to include only tools that you really, really need versus like just sending all tools, because then that's like, confusion, right? But if I scroll down, I have the MCP server Hugging Face here. I have the tools that I want selected here. And same for the GitHub one. I thought I deselected this. Maybe they got reset. But there's a bunch of tools here that I don't need, that I could potentially get better performance or like better responses if I deselected some of these. But you see you have a bunch of tools here. And then from our server too, we have AI Research Hub, and we see you have Ad Paper, Ad Repository, Get GitHub Searches, Research Topic, and these are like the different tools that we have, right? So that's how you would configure inside of your MCP.json other MCP servers. And that's our second step, right? Go to Hugging Face, find papers related to this topic, right? Then we are calling, once again, our own MCP, and we have this get GitHub searches, which what I did here was essentially create, here we have like a better, like a query, or a clear way of querying, or like a clearer way or a better way of providing a query for the GitHub MCP server. So we see this here, right? We're calling GitHub searches, that tool there, and then we're giving the topic implementation, and then we're also providing additional information saying that it's like Python here, right? And we are providing additional commands and instructions. Use GitHub MCP with these search terms. And again, here is where you'll have to like experiment a lot in terms of like, what additional details can I add, what to remove. There's like a sweet spot, right? I always think of it being like, you have the right model with the right prompt and the right context. You don't want to like overdo it on any of those. You want to find a sweet spot between those three. And again, as you're working with this, you'll figure that out. It just is a lot of experimentation. This field is very new. This stuff is changing so fast, but yeah, it's best practices now may look a little different, but overall, I think the key is just finding balance amongst those three things, right? So yeah, we have that get GitHub searches, where we're essentially composing a query from our topic and sending it out off to a search GitHub repos, and then we're calling that GitHub MCP, right? Which has a search repositories tool, and then we're providing the query there as well. And then we go into our step 5, which is add findings, which is another tool for us here. Add findings. Where are you? Add paper. It's add paper. It's add paper and add repository. So add paper essentially just adds like to this here to our database JSON file, right? And then same with add repository, which goes and adds to that JSON file as well. And then we have an update research status, which you all saw, hopefully was very quick. I opened it a little too late, but this was started as pending. Once it was complete, it switched to complete there. So that's going to go ahead and update. It's a tool that does that as well. And then we have check research, which essentially is the resource that we can leverage to see what research we've done as of lately, right? So I'm going to close this now, and we can kind of scroll down and look at that. Server.py. Okay, so we have, I'm going to scroll down. I should research status. It's fine. Prime. Where is, okay, cool. So this is the one we're looking for. This here, which is a resource, which is essentially going to provide us like some kind of information or like text or something like that, right? So I should be able to go in here and then move over here and then add the context MCP resource, and then we'll say this here. I think I could probably, you know what? I'm actually going to close this, and I'm going to close this too, and then I close this here, and then I think I should be able to just send this without anything. Oh, I can't send it empty. What have I been researching lately? How about that? Let's see. So essentially, this should invoke that resource, which is just, it reads the JSON file.
Nice.
Yeah, there we go. So now it's just based on your research dashboard. Here's what you've been researching lately. And it gives us one completed research project and just kind of like a summary of what we've been doing. If I open server.py, really all it does is goes and calls get research from our paper manager. And if we look at our paper manager, where is our get research summary? It just really simple. Again, it's like it isn't necessarily, it's just like someone had mentioned, like this is like a different way of programming, sort of like a different mentality around programming. It very much is just you leveraging code to communicate with all these new tools and LLMs that we have available, but it's still very much is just, in this case, like Python code that you've probably worked with as well, right? So with our server here, we have the different tools, right? We've kind of talked about tools a lot. Tools just do something, right? Execute something, interact with something, right? And then we have a bunch of tools here. I'm gonna just collapse these. I have another tool. I think I put all the tools at the top. Yeah. And then we have the prompt. Again, I like to use these to kind of just define workflows to make it easier for the users who are trying to work with your MCP server. And you can be very opinionated here, which I like. But then again, obviously this kind of just like auto completes into here, into like so if I do this, right? What's another thing? Attention. Let's just say attention. It's auto completes here. Obviously the user can go and change this, right? But I think it does give them like a good start as to like, okay, how do I invoke all the stuff that the MCP server is capable of doing? You can provide kind of an easy way for them to do that. And then we also have that resource, which is like read only in this case. It just gives us a summary of that too. And I know, Marlene, you mentioned sampling, right? So sampling is, I guess, kind of like a prompt in a way, but you know how, so for example, here in GitHub Copilot chat, we have the ability to work with models, right? So obviously the LLM functionality, I can select Claude, Sonnet, I can select GPT-4, and then I have my own models. So that's the ones that are listed with other models. Not my own, not models that I've made, but like models that I have available via like an API key. yeah. No, I'm not. I'm not that smart. But we have that ability that GitHub Copilot chat has interactions with an LLM, right? So what you can do with sampling is essentially you create like some kind of functionality that puts sort of like the responsibility back onto the client to use its LLM to generate. I mean, we can come up with an example here. So for example, let's say we want to do, I don't know, let's think of something like maybe create like a topics that I should explore, or maybe just like, well, we just keep it simple. So we could just say something like this. I'm going to put this down here. So this is going to continue being just actually, since it's a tool, I'm going to put it up here just to keep things a little organized. And then you can kind of follow the same when programming, like it's like patterns, right? You can kind of follow the same thing that we have here, right? So we know we need to use the tool decorator, right? So we have this, I'm just literally looking what we have above. And then I can say, okay, description. And let's just say it's something like generate three tips on researching a topic, something like that. So essentially what we can do is like say I provide a topic and I want it to give me maybe like I don't know, the most popular things about that topic, or like things that I absolutely need to know about that topic. I'm going to call them tips for now, but if we need to improve it, we'll do that as we go. So then obviously we do async def, and then this is just Python code. Like there's nothing special about this. It's just back to the basics, right? And then we're going to call this generate research tips, right? And then we need to understand, what do we need to provide for this tool to work? Well, because we want it to be a topic, we will need topic, right? Topic, and then string. This could get way more complex if you wanted to, or way more simple, you know, whatever it is, right? And because we want to interact with this thing called like sampling, which is a functionality that MCP has, this thing called FastMCP, which is the library that we're using. Like Marlene had showed before, you can use context, which gives us access to that functionality that MCP servers have. So we'll just call this CTX, which is of type context, right? And then we are going to, honestly, let's keep it simple. Let's just return a string. Let's just say we want a string returned to us, and then, you know, this could eventually be like a dictionary. I don't know, however detailed you want it to, but we'll keep it simple, right? Now, we need to provide a prompt here because we have to give information or give like something for the client to be able to send off to the LLM, right? We can't keep it empty because then it's not going to know what to do, right? And what do we want it to do? We can say here, generate or like give. We'll keep generate. I like using very like action oriented words like create, update, delete, copy, mirror, mimic, stuff like that. So it's like they're like very information dense words where instead of saying like give me 3, you can just say generate, which have like the same kind of information but in less words, right? So we can say generate three tips on researching, and then we need to provide in that we call the topic. Oh, I forgot to put the F here. Come here. And then maybe it might be helpful if we have this in like single quotes, just so it knows that it's like
something different.
Yeah. There. And then again, this is the thing you kind of play with, and there's like a back and forth until you get it. I guess that's like the thing with working with LLMs, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we can just call it, like we can just say response. Oh my goodness, I can't type today. Response equals the what is it called? Oh, CTX. And then here we have the access to that functionality that MCP servers have, right? So sample. And then what are we sending off? Just want you to sample using this prompt here. Yeah. Now we can access this this should return as a text, I believe. So if we just do return response dot text, no text here. Is it
content?
Hold on, let me see here. Context. Content. Sample content block. Content block text content. Okay, so if we do if response that type, right? Type. Mm-hmm. Oh no, we should be able to access type. Equals text, right?
Yeah.
And then we do return response dot text, else return unable to generate. How about that? This is not giving us. I thought we could access.
Is it response.content like COT?
Oh wait, hold on.
Does that work?
Good. It's a coroutine, so I think I just forgot.
Okay.
Wait.
Yeah,
I think that was it.
Okay. That's nice. That's actually simpler than what I.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So now, since we've made this change, let's see if it works. Let's go to mcp.json. Because we added a new tool, so you see it says here 5 tools. We have to restart it.
Yeah.
And did it restart? It should now say 6 tools, right? Oh no, it's restarting. No, nice. I thought that wasn't going to work for a second. Now it says 6 tools. So now let's close. Let me see. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to copy this name here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to close this, open this. I'm going to clear all my chats, no context whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to say use, and then I'm going to say the tool name, which on topic, what's like I think multimodal models. How about that?
Yeah.
All right, let's see if that works. Oh, come on. What does it say? Tools. Okay.
So you gotta reduce the number. That's the thing with Code Sonnet 4. I feel like it's super picky about the number.
Well, let's try another model.
We could try. I mean, it's fine under 100.
I have 124. Okay. We probably don't need GitHub.
That for now, yeah.
GitHub has so many.
Okay. You've got to press OK. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Actually, then I can just do try again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, best practice, don't have that many tools.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this says the MCP server AI Research Hub has issued a request to make a language model call. Okay. So we see because we are doing we're using, we're sampling. Yeah. We're going to invoke the LLM on the client side. So it's asking, hey, do you want to do this? And like, obviously it's asking this because, we have to consider like token usage and stuff like that. Yeah. And if you didn't want it, you could just hit no, or like you have never. That seems a little aggressive, but you also have not now, always, and then allow in the session. So I'm just going to click allow in the session, and let's see what happens. So it ran it. That's good. Okay, cool. Look, it looks like it's going to work. Research tips for multimodal survey, foundational papers and benchmarks. Start by reading seminal papers such as, okay, cool. Understand modalities and fusion techniques. Dive into how different data types, images. Okay, cool. Explore open source implementations and frameworks. All right, this last one I felt like it's kind of generic, but yeah, I feel like you can go and define just make it much more detailed and have it maybe return like, I don't know, just more information, right? By just updating that. Where is it? Server. This, go down. Where do we go? Here, right? Yeah. Like, all we're saying is generate 3 tips on researching, right? So
exactly.
That's sampling. So you have your different things, right? You have your resources, you have your tools. Again, I recommend keep Paper Manager as is, and then go and implement your own MCP implementation on this. You can also add stuff like, so for example, in our research_papers.json, we have like the papers found, right? We have the repositories found, but also what if you had some way to like add notes? And like right now there's just like this kind of very simple notes functionality. But what if you wanted to be able to assign a note specific to a paper or something like that? Like think of like different functionalities that you could add. Maybe there's like favorite papers, or I don't know, so many things that you can go and add, but I've left it simple so you can use your imagination and your creativity. How much time do we have left? Okay, we have a little bit. We have questions that we probably want to get to. Oh, I do have another slide that I want to show. Let me, hold on.
Someone's asking if we are live or pre-recorded. We are live right now.
We are live, baby. Did you not see us almost make that mistake? That's simple, just forgetting the awake keyword. Of course we're live and in the flesh. I was going to bring up hold on. Let me bring up the, right. Hold on. Where is can we switch to both of our cameras just so I can switch screens, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's keep it there for a second.
I will say that I wanted to also show you all the Study Buddy app, how it works. I don't know if we have time. I wanted to show the full app.
I think we have time. We have like,
do we have
9 minutes?
We have 9 minutes. Okay, let me go. I don't know if we want some Q&A. Maybe we want some Q&A time. Okay, maybe let me just show it. Let me just show you the full app because I think it's kind of cool. All right, let me do that.
All right, let's bring up Marlene's
can you bring up my screen? Okay.
Perfect.
Let me show you. So this is ideal, and this is what's in the GitHub. I'm going to update like all the other things so that you have the step-by-step. But so I copied these Copilot instructions, and I think this is like super helpful when you're trying to create workflows in agent mode that are more autonomous. Copilot mode is a way to be able to like make sure that the agent follows the steps, step by step. And so the MCP server, which is server part 2, I'm just going to copy the relative path and we'll close everything else. And then let me send it here. And I want to just show you like what it ultimately was supposed to, how it was supposed to work. So I put all of the Study Buddy stuff together. And then what you are supposed to do is you can run and say, hi, I want to learn Python. And then it's going to go through this workflow where it first says, welcome to the Study Buddy app, the Python Study Buddy application. And then the first thing is we're learning about the prompts. So this is a prompt that allows it to generate beginner topics. So we say beginner, and then we send through the prompt. That's just manually sending through the prompt. I showed you in the other example how you can actually get it to do that with a tool. And then the next thing is that we have all these exercises. So let's ask it to generate some exercises about conditional statements, which is number 3. And it will say, excellent choice. Let's create an exercise for conditional statements. Then we can do another prompt, which is the generate exercises prompt. And we need to pass in this topic is the first value we're going to pass in. And then our level, which is the beginner level, we're going to pass that in here. Then we can run that. And it's going to say, I'll generate 5 Python exercises on conditional statements. And this whole process is being like, I didn't have to necessarily do like pass through the individual like prompts and things. I could just have automated the whole thing, but I had wanted to show how it works. And then this is the create exercise tool that we had earlier, where it's just going to create the exercise for us. And it shows us which ones it's creating. And it says, great, we need your name to be able to track your progress. So I'm going to say my name is Marlene. And then it should create like a tracking object for me, a track progress one. So I'm just going to run that. And I'm also going to open my terminal because now it's almost done. Open the terminal. Let's have a new terminal open. And it's going to say, wants my username to actually start the app. So let's see what the app looks like. Hopefully it's going to start. Wait, did it start here? Where did it start? Oh, okay. To run it, it needs, so we're going to say, yes, run it. Gives the command. And we press continue. Oh no. Okay, it didn't work. I don't know why it's not working now. It's okay.
No module named Simple Study Buddy. Is it running in like the wrong folder or something?
No, it's looking for the Simple Study. But I deleted that file because I didn't think I needed it.
Maybe that's homework for people. Like, let's push what we have, and then they can figure out how to piece it together.
Exactly. But the Study Buddy, the Simple Study Buddy one is on the GitHub, so you should be able to find it there. And it should just work where let me stop sharing.
Yeah.
It should just work where you get like a cool terminal application showing up. So for homework, try it out. It works in VS Code. Just use the server, the number 2 one. So if you go into the Study Buddy folder, or like if you just use this as the server part 2 one, it should just work. So yeah,
we'll update the README we'll have like a homework session on the README.
Yeah, it's great that it doesn't work just
that was intentional, actually.
That was intentional. Everyone, sorry.
Can we bring up my screen just to share the last, and then we'll try to get to some questions. So we were talking, we have different hosts, different tools and things that we can use, right? In our case, we used VS Code as the host, GitHub Copilot was the client, and then we were leveraging just Python to build the local MCP. But MCP at Microsoft, we have a couple of options. We have, as for like the client and host, we have Foundry, Agent, Visual Studio, Windows, Teams, Semantic Kernel. Tools, there are so many. I can't even name all of these. With different registries to build. Someone was talking about, can I build an MCP and make it available to the public? Yes, we have. There's the C# MCP SDK. There's Azure API Management. There's Azure Functions. I think there's containers apps might have something too. Azure App Server. There's so many ways to be able to build these things. So like pick and choose, and you can definitely do it.
100%. Awesome.
What kind of questions? We have a few minutes to tackle a couple of these questions.
Is the input and output of the MCP included in the token count of an LLM?
Yes.
Yeah.
If anything that is in your prompts, like that you're sending to an LLM, is going to be included as the token count. Like, it doesn't matter where it comes from, it will be part of that. Can we mention
hashtag tool name?
Yes. Yeah. Just like any other tool that you have available, the ones that you create with your MCP server, you will also be able to call them. Though we just use like natural text, but you can also like explicitly call them this way.
Yes. And there is also a way to call tool set if you want to call the tool set as well.
We just answered this one here too. Is it always required to mention the tool name when chatting with Copilot? No, you could say instead of like use start research or whatever we were calling it, you can just say research this topic. It should be able to understand. Again, different models will behave differently. Like if you're using, like we use the Sonnet models today, but if you're using like GPT or something else, you may have to like do tweaks to the prompt, but you don't explicitly have to say the tool name.
Yeah.
How to convince the org to enable the MCP server? Is it safe to use? Could there be any security issues with this? Yeah, I think with everything there's security issues. So first of all, you should have like security measures in place that are applied to every kind of type of tool, not just like MCP or AI or LLM related ones. Yeah. And then we didn't touch on auth or security type things. Just I feel like maybe we'll do like a second session where we cover stuff that are a little bit more advanced. As we know, auth can be very particular, finicky. But there are different ways to secure your MCP servers as well, and then you just have to make sure that implementation matches what your company requires, I think.
Yeah, I also will say for databases specifically, I would avoid currently using MCP for databases in production, just because I think there've been a couple of people who have like identified ways to like hack the databases with MCP, even if it's read only. So I say just for resources specifically, I wouldn't use them, but for everything else, I would in production.
Yeah, should be and fine. Some of the models themselves are really, really like they want to do work, they want to make changes. Yeah. And that doesn't even have to do anything with your MCP. So like, I think just overall security when it comes to LLM, you just have to LLMs, you have to be like very careful, right?
Yeah.
What else do we have here? Let me see. I saw one that I wanted to touch on.
Can agents be used to conduct data analysis? Mm-hmm. Yes, they can.
Yeah.
That is an LLM. Could an agent do this without making the ML model?
Could an agent do this without, can agents be used to conduct data analysis? ML model could be trained to take pictures of circles or squares and categorize them. Can an agent do this without making the LLM model?
Yeah, I think so. There's some LLMs. I mean, a lot of the LLMs nowadays can use embeddings to see and categorize things to see, but using image embeddings, for example. So you wouldn't need to make the ML model yourself.
Yeah, you just choose the right model that like I think they're called multimodals, but I think a lot of them will just understand embeddings that you've generated from your images, and then you'll just have to instruct it to what it needs to categorize. You wouldn't have to make a model from scratch for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. Where I saw someone asking about the mcp.json file. I just lost it. What's the command at mcp.json? Can you explain more? I'm not using Conda. Also, that's just like, because at the end of the day, the MCP server it's like a Python file in our case, right? Yeah. So how do we run that Python file? What commands are we using? We are using UV run, but maybe you have some kind of other way that you execute your Python file. That's the command and the arguments that you need to be able to provide for it to run. It's going to look different for like .NET. It's going to look different for like any kind of other language and framework that you're using. But for us, we're using UV, so that's why that's in that file.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention that I was using Conda. Like I had a base environment activated for Conda, but I should have deactivated that because most people don't use Conda at the moment, but I just had used it. So that's where UV lived for me. So yeah wherever UV is living is where you would point it
Which UV? I think that shows you where UV is, right?
100%.
Command? Which UV? Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Someone saying, would we have time for Angular, TypeScript, MCP as well? There's a JavaScript stream coming up soon, or maybe it has happened. I don't know.
We should know. We have there's also MCP Dev Days. Recommend that.
Yeah, we should.
We'll drop a link in that if you want to learn more MCP stuff. We'll have that in the chat as well. And we had this session is part of a series. I think we had C# already and a couple of different languages, which is awesome. We're doing the Python one. I think we have a couple more coming up as well. We'll drop the link to that shortly as well. Anyway, we are at time. The recording will be available for you to kind of watch through. Go and do the homework that was intentionally made for you. And thanks so much for hanging out with us.
Thanks.
We'll see you in the next one or whenever that is. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.